I came to surprise my family on Christmas Eve, carrying a small, carefully wrapped package that had cost me exactly $29. Money I had saved by skipping lunches at work for a week. The snow outside crunched under my boots as I approached the house, the warm yellow glow from the windows filling me with a rare excitement. I imagined their faces when they saw me. I imagined my daughter dropping the dish she'd be carrying, running to open the door, wrapping her arms around me with the same warmth she used to when she was a little girl. I imagined my grandchildren squealing with joy, jumping into my arms, fighting over who would open the surprise first. I imagined laughter, hugs, the smell of cookies baking in the oven, the kind of Christmas I had seen in movies but never really lived. But as I walked closer to the porch, their voices drifted out through the slightly open window, carried by the cold wind like shards of ice. Pretend we're not home. My heart stopped. Everything inside me froze, even the breath in my chest. First I thought I misheard. Maybe they were joking, maybe they were playing a game, maybe they were talking about some salesperson or neighbor knocking earlier. But then my daughter's voice followed, sharp, irritated, unmistakable. "It's Mom. Don't open the door. I don't have the energy for her tonight." Those words, they didn't just hurt. They cracked something deep inside me that had already been fragile for years. I stepped back from the window as though the voices had physically pushed me away. Suddenly, the warm lights inside the house didn't feel warm anymore. They felt like a world I didn't belong to, a world I was watching from the outside, face pressed against the cold glass of reality. For a moment I simply stood there, clutching the gift in my hands so tightly the edges dug into my palms. $29. Hours of choosing the perfect thing. Days of imagining their smiles. Weeks of loneliness that I tried to fight by telling myself, Christmas will be different. They'll want me there. Family means something. But the truth hit me harder than the winter wind. They didn't want me. Not even on Christmas Eve. I stepped off the porch quietly, the way someone does when they leave a place they were never welcome in to begin with. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I didn't try to explain why I came. I just walked away, each step heavier than the last. The snow clung to my shoes, my coat, my eyelashes, but it wasn't the cold outside that stung. It was the cold inside their words. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my vision blurred, not from the icy wind, but from tears I forced myself not to shed. Crying on the street felt too vulnerable, too exposed. So I swallowed it, let it freeze somewhere inside my chest, and kept walking. Cars passed by, their headlights painting long shadows across the pavement. Families inside them laughed, sang along to Christmas songs, carried wrapped gifts and happiness I had forgotten the feeling of. And there I was, alone on Christmas Eve, walking back with a gift no one wanted to receive. I held it tighter, not because it mattered anymore, but because it was the only thing in the world I had been excited about. That small, simple package had been my symbol of love, of effort, of hope. And now it felt like an embarrassing reminder of how misplaced my hopes had always been. As I walked, the cold seeped through my coat and into my bones. My breath came out in shaky clouds, mingling with the winter night. The world around me glittered with decorations. Twinkling lights on rooftops, wreaths on doors, shimmering ornaments on trees visible through glowing windows. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating together, wrapped in warmth and companionship. And I realized something painfully clear. You can be surrounded by people your whole life and still end up utterly alone. I reached the bus stop and sat down on the frozen bench, the 30 years of my sacrifice replaying in my mind like a cruel movie. I remembered the nights I stayed awake designing flight control systems for fighter jets. My hands steady, my mind sharp, my pride real. I remembered the long shifts, the impossible deadlines, the pressure of knowing that my work kept people alive in the sky. I remembered the awards I received, the respect from colleagues, the satisfaction of doing something meaningful. I used to be someone important, someone capable, someone respected. How strange that a woman who once engineered systems that pilots trusted with their lives couldn't even earn trust from her own family. I stared at the traffic passing by, the gift resting on my lap, now feeling heavier than any burden I had ever carried. A mother's love is strange. She gives and gives and gives, even when nothing comes back. But tonight, standing outside a house where my existence was seen as an inconvenience, I felt something inside me shift. Something small but powerful. Something like a tiny flame refusing to go out no matter how hard the world blew against it. Maybe this Christmas wouldn't be about them. Maybe for the first time, it needed to be about me. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, straightened my coat, and took a slow, steady breath. The night was still cold. The world was still harsh. But I wasn't ready to break, not yet. And so, alone at that bus stop, beneath the quiet snow and distant lights, my story began again. Not with celebration but with pain. Not with family but with truth. Not with welcome but with a closed door. A door that would soon lead me toward something I never expected. Something that would change my life in ways I could never imagine. The bus arrived with a low mechanical sigh, its doors opening like tired arms welcoming anyone who sought refuge from the cold night outside. I stepped in slowly, brushing the snow from my coat as the warm air fogged up my glasses. There were only 3 other passengers, an elderly man staring out the window with empty eyes, a young couple whispering to each other with excitement, and a teenage boy tapping rapidly on his phone screen. No one looked at me. No one cared who I was, where I was going, or why a woman my age was riding a city bus alone on Christmas Eve. And oddly, that anonymity felt safer than the home I had just walked away from. I sat near the back, the seat stiff beneath me, and placed the small gift beside my bag. For a moment I just watched the snowflakes racing across the bus windows, melting the instant they touched the glass. They reminded me of dreams, beautiful, delicate, and destined to vanish before you can hold them. The bus jerked forward, and with every turn it made, I drifted deeper into memories I had spent years avoiding. There was a time, long before disappointment became a permanent shadow, when Christmas meant something to me. When my husband was alive, when my daughter was still young, when laughter didn't feel like a luxury but a part of everyday life. I remembered the year my daughter was 5 and insisted on decorating the tree herself. She hung all the ornaments on one single branch until it sagged like a tired arm, and my husband and I spent the whole evening laughing. We didn't fix the tree. We left it exactly how she made it, lopsided and wonderful. That memory hit me with a tenderness that hurt. My daughter used to adore me, cling to me, watch the door waiting for me to come home. What happened to us? When did she stop seeing me as her mother and start seeing me as a burden? Was it gradual? Or did I miss some turning point? Or maybe this was always coming, maybe love, like everything else, wears out eventually when one person gives and the other only takes. The bus rolled past glowing houses wrapped in Christmas lights, each window holding a different story. Families drinking hot cocoa, children in matching pajamas, grandparents surrounded by affection I could only dream of. I wondered what the people inside those houses would think if they knew that somewhere out there sat a woman who once engineered systems that protected fighter pilots, yet couldn't protect her own heart from breaking. As the bus slowed again, a small boy got on with his father. He couldn't have been more than 4. He tugged his father's coat and asked questions with the curiosity only a child has. The father responded patiently, gently, lovingly. And that simple exchange, something so ordinary, so natural, sent a sharp ache through me. I once had that. Not the romance, not the partnership, but the feeling of being needed, of having someone look at me with trust and admiration. Now, I couldn't even get them to open the door. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the sting, but my thoughts kept circling the same painful truth. People change. Love fades. Effort becomes obligation. And sometimes, without meaning to, the people you love the most walk you out of their hearts long before they walk you out of their homes. When the bus finally reached downtown, I stepped off into a quieter, darker part of the city. Shops were closing early for the holiday, their signs flickering. The cold felt sharper here, less forgiving. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and started walking with no real destination in mind. My feet carried me through empty streets lit by dim street lamps, each pool of light like a small island in a sea of shadows. As I walked, I kept hearing my daughter's voice repeating in my mind, "Don't open the door. I don't have the energy for her tonight." Her. Not Mom. Just her. I didn't know a few words could change a mother so deeply, but those words had carved a hollow space inside me, one I knew would take years to fill, if it ever did. I passed a bakery where a woman in a red apron flipped the sign to closed. I passed a bookstore that had put a tiny Christmas tree in the window next to a stack of novels. I passed a group of teenagers laughing loudly as they dragged a sled across the pavement. Life kept happening around me, loud and bright and careless, while mine felt paused on a single devastating moment. Eventually, I found myself near the small rented room I had been living in since downsizing my life. Not because I wanted to, but because retirement didn't pay enough to keep my old home, especially after medical bills and debt had chewed through my savings. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the silence greeted me like an old companion. No decorations, no lights, no tree. Just a small bed, a desk covered with old receipts, and a heater that rattled louder than it warmed. I placed the gift on the table and stared at it for a long time. It looked so out of place in the room. Too colorful, too hopeful, too full of a love that had nowhere left to go. A part of me wanted to unwrap it just to see if it would hurt less. Another part wanted to throw it away so I wouldn't have to be reminded. But I didn't do either. Instead, I sat down and whispered to myself, "You're not worthless. You're not a burden. You're not invisible." Saying it didn't make me believe it, not yet. But it was a start. I made myself a cup of cheap instant coffee, sat by the window, and watched the snowfall blur the city lights. Somewhere beneath those layers of snow, somewhere deep in a quiet corner of my heart, a thought began to form. Not loud, not confident, but present. Maybe I deserved better than closed doors. Maybe I deserved more than being someone's inconvenient afterthought. Maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't ending tonight. Maybe it was only shifting. And little did I know, what was coming next would shake my life far more than the cold words that pushed me away. It would lead me into truths, confrontations, and revelations that would redefine everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the meaning of family. Morning came slowly, bleeding pale light through the thin curtains of my small room. I hardly slept, drifting in and out of the kind of restless dreams that leave you more tired than before. The world outside looked muted, washed in gray winter fog. Christmas Day. A day meant for togetherness, warmth, family. Things I once had, things I still longed for even though they no longer belonged to me. I wrapped my cold hands around the coffee mug and stared at the steam curling upward like little ghosts of memories I couldn't escape. For the first time in years, I didn't have anywhere to go, anyone waiting for me, or any obligations to fulfill. Should have felt freeing, but it didn't. It felt like standing outside your own life, watching someone else live the version you were supposed to have. I thought about calling them once more. Just to say Merry Christmas, just to hear their voices. But then my daughter's words echoed again. I don't have the energy for her tonight. My heart squeezed at the memory, as if someone pressed a thumb deep into a bruise. Rejecting someone you love hurts far worse than any physical injury. And I knew that if I called and she didn't answer, or worse, answered with cold politeness, it would break me in a way I wouldn't recover from. So I placed my phone face down, refusing to let hope trick me again. Trying to distract myself, I opened the old wooden chest I'd kept for years. Inside were faded photos, medals from my career, and small items I'd collected from places my work had taken me. I picked up a photo of myself standing beside a fighter jet, my hair whipping in the wind, eyes full of ambition. That woman had been fearless, confident, respected. She designed systems that kept pilots alive. She solved problems most people never even understood. She was someone people depended on. And yet now, she was the same woman no one wanted to open the door for. Life was unkind that way. Glory didn't guarantee gratitude, and sacrifices didn't ensure loyalty. Just then, a soft knock interrupted the quiet. I froze. No one visited me, not neighbors, not friends, not family. Another knock came, slightly louder. My heart thudded as I opened the door. Outside stood my landlord's daughter, a shy girl with big brown eyes and a worn jacket that seemed too thin for the weather. She held a plate covered with foil. "My mom said you might not have company today," she murmured. "We made extra breakfast. It's nothing fancy, but she said you shouldn't be alone." Her voice trembled, as if afraid I might refuse. But something inside me cracked, the fragile wall I'd built in the last 12 hours. I accepted the plate, my throat tight, and managed to whisper a thank you. When she left, I sat at the table and lifted the foil. Scrambled eggs, 2 biscuits, and a small piece of honey cake. Simple, homemade, and more comforting than luxury meals ever could be. Tears burned behind my eyes before I could stop them. This small kindness from a family that owed me nothing meant everything to someone who felt forgotten by the people who should have cared the most. I ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it stitched a small part of me back together. For the first time since last night, the room didn't feel entirely empty. After breakfast, I bundled up and stepped outside. Snow had stopped but left a soft white blanket over the streets. Children played in the distance, laughter echoing like little bells. A man shoveled his driveway. A woman walked her dog. The world was moving, alive, and for a moment I felt like maybe I could move with it too. I walked aimlessly, letting the cold nip at my cheeks. Eventually, I found myself in a small park. Families gathered around benches, couples held hands, and a group of volunteers handed out warm clothes to the homeless. I hesitated, then approached one of the volunteers, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Would you like a cup of hot cocoa?" she asked. I nodded, and she handed me a steaming cup. The kindness of strangers was beginning to feel like a lifeline. She looked at me closely. "Rough day." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Rough night," I corrected. The woman didn't pry or ask uncomfortable questions. She simply nodded and said, "Sometimes the people we expect comfort from are the ones who disappoint us most. But that doesn't mean comfort can't find you another way." Her words struck me harder than she knew. We spoke for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just simple conversation. But even that was more connection than I'd felt in a long time. When I left the park, something in my chest felt lighter. Not healed but loosened. As I walked back home, I thought about how life has a strange way of filling the cracks with unexpected kindness. Last night I felt completely abandoned. But today, I'd received more compassion from strangers than from the family I'd spent my life loving. Still, a question lingered in my mind, haunting me with its weight. Why didn't they want me? The truth was coming. Whether I was ready for it or not, the next chapter of my life was already moving toward me, carrying revelations that would not only explain everything, but also reshape the way I saw my daughter, my past, and myself. Little did I know, the truth waiting for me was darker than rejection, and more painful than any closed door. When I returned home from my walk, the silence felt different. Not as crushing as before, but still heavy enough to remind me that something in my world was deeply broken. I tried to distract myself by organizing the few decorations I kept in a small box. A ceramic angel my daughter made in 2nd grade, a framed picture of us at the county fair, and a tiny snow globe from a trip we once took together. Each object carried a memory, and each memory carried a sting. Still, I placed them gently on the shelf, as if arranging pieces of a life that had slipped through my fingers. I sat on the edge of the bed afterward, pressing my hand to my sternum where a dull ache had settled, an ache I didn't want to name but couldn't ignore anymore. I picked up my phone again, knowing I shouldn't, knowing it was a doorway to hurt. My last text to my daughter, "I'm in town. I'd love to stop by," still sat unread. No reply. No call. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than anger ever could. I opened my social media instead, and almost immediately I regretted it. There she was, my daughter, smiling in a photo posted by one of her friends. A Christmas Eve gathering. Dozens of people crammed into a warm, glowing living room. Laughter, messy hairstyles, ugly sweaters, twinkling lights. And right there, in the caption, were words that cut deeper than anything else. "Finally home with the people I love." I stared at that picture for a long, painful moment, my breath stuck somewhere between a gasp and a sob. She wasn't alone. She wasn't tired. She wasn't stressed. She wasn't not in the mood. She had lied. And worse, she had chosen everyone else over me. I realized then that the rejection wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was deliberate. It was planned. It was the truth she didn't want to say to my face. The tears I'd been holding back all morning finally broke through. They slipped down my cheeks silently, warm against the cold air of the room. A part of me wanted to be angry, to yell, to slam something, anything, but the exhaustion in my bones was stronger than the anger. So I just sat there letting my grief wash over me. Because sometimes the only thing you can do is feel what hurts until it stops suffocating you. But healing doesn't wait for permission, and life doesn't pause for heartbreak. An email notification popped up, an unexpected one. It was from an old colleague at the aerospace firm where I once worked. I hadn't spoken to him in years. My hands trembled as I opened it. "We're rebuilding the engineering team," it read. "Your name kept coming up. Would you consider returning? Even part-time?" My breath caught. After everything that had happened, after the sacrifices I'd made, after walking away from my career to raise my daughter, to support her, to be the mother she needed. This felt like the universe whispering, "You are still worth something." A spark lit inside me. Something I hadn't felt since long before last night. Hope. Real hope. Not for reconciliation or validation from people who didn't value me, but hope for myself. I replied immediately, trying to keep my hands steady as I typed. After hitting send, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply. For the first time, the future didn't feel like an empty hallway I was wandering through alone. It felt like an open door. But that moment of peace didn't last long. A sudden knock rattled my door, sharp, urgent. Nothing like the gentle taps from the landlord's daughter earlier. I froze, heart pounding. Something about the sound felt wrong. I stood up slowly and approached the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, tall, wearing a thick coat and holding a folder in his gloved hands. "Ma'am," he called out. "I need to speak with you. It's about your daughter." My blood ran cold. Fear surged through me like an electrical shock. I unlocked the door with trembling hands and opened it halfway. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. He handed me a card. "Child Protective Services." I felt the world tilt. "We need to discuss a matter your daughter reported," he said calmly. "She listed you as an emergency contact." I blinked, unable to process his words. "Emergency? What happened? Is she hurt?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than any sentence could. "I think it's better we sit down," he said gently. "There are things you need to know. Things that may change how you understand all of this." My knees weakened, but I stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. As he crossed the threshold, I felt the walls of my world shifting again. Only this time not from heartbreak. From truth. A truth darker, deeper, and more painful than anything I had imagined. A truth that would explain her rejection. A truth that would break me before it set me free. The man from Child Protective Services sat carefully on the edge of the armchair, the folder balanced on his knees as though its contents were fragile enough to break. I sat across from him, hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white, trying to keep myself steady. He studied me for a moment, not suspiciously, but as someone assessing whether I was strong enough to hear what he was about to say. "First," he began softly, "your daughter is physically safe. Nothing immediately dangerous has happened to her." Relief swept through me like a wave, my chest loosening for the first time since he'd knocked on my door. But that relief lasted only seconds before he continued. "However, she did file a statement recently, one that mentions you." My heart sank again, as if pulled underwater by an unseen force. "Me?" I whispered. "Why? I haven't seen her. I haven't spoken to her. How could she file anything about me?" His eyes softened with sympathy. "That is exactly why I'm here. She told us you've been emotionally harmful to her, and that she needed distance to feel safe." The words hit me like a punch. Emotionally harmful? Safe from me? I felt dizzy, as though the room tilted around me. I struggled to breathe. "There must be a mistake," I stammered. "I would never hurt her. I raised her alone. I gave up my career for her. My voice cracked. The man held up his hand gently. "I know. And her report doesn't accuse you of recent actions. It's complicated." He hesitated, flipping open the folder. The sound of paper rustling in the quiet room felt unnervingly loud. "Your daughter is going through something mentally and emotionally. She's been experiencing anxiety, panic attacks, and episodes. She mentioned unresolved childhood trauma. My jaw tightened. I shook my head slowly. She had a good childhood. I did my best. I protected her. I worked hard to give her what I never had. The man nodded. I believe you. But trauma doesn't always come from abuse. Sometimes it comes from absence, even if that absence was unintentional. My stomach sank. The ghosts of my past, the long nights at the lab, the top-secret deadlines, the periods of emotional numbness after her father died, rose like smoke around me. Memories I buried, things I thought she was too young to remember. But children always remember the moments adults forget. He continued gently. She told us she felt invisible, like she always came second to your work. That she didn't feel chosen. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest, deeper than any injury I'd ever endured. But I did choose her. I whispered, my voice trembling. I left everything for her. He nodded again. Sometimes kids don't see the sacrifices. They only see the moments you weren't there. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my hands to my face, struggling to breathe through the ache. I had spent years believing I was doing the right thing. But maybe, in trying to provide for her future, I had wounded her present. The man leaned forward. Your daughter never accused you of malice. She said you were a good mother. A loving mother. But she also said she was hurting. And didn't know how to tell you. So she pushed you away. My heart cracked open at those words. Raw, painful, but strangely clarifying. He added, she listed you as her emergency contact because she still sees you as the person who can save her. Even if she believes she needs distance right now. A sob escaped me before I could swallow it. All this time I had assumed she didn't want me. That she didn't care. That she had replaced me. But the truth was far more complex. She wasn't rejecting me out of hatred. She was protecting herself from a wound she didn't know how to articulate. The man closed the folder quietly. She started therapy last month. She's trying. But she's not ready to face you yet. She needs time and space and healing. I wiped my tears with shaking hands. So what am I supposed to do? I whispered. His answer was gentle but firm. You give her exactly what she asked for. Space without punishment. Love without pressure. Patience without bitterness. You wait. Not because she deserves it, but because you love her. His words echoed through the room, settling deep into the hollow spaces inside me. For years I thought love meant showing up. But maybe this time love meant stepping back. He stood to leave, offering me a reassuring smile. She isn't lost, he said softly. She's just hurting. People who hurt often hide behind distance. But distance doesn't erase love. After he left, I sat alone, the silence somehow heavier yet strangely clearer. My daughter wasn't rejecting me because she despised me. She was rejecting me because she was broken, and she didn't know how to break without cutting me too. I thought the night I heard, "Pretend we're not home," was the cruel truth. But it had been a symptom, not the sickness. And now for the first time I knew what I was truly fighting for. But healing was never a straight line. And the next day would bring a revelation that shattered the last piece of the story I thought I understood, and forced me to confront a truth neither of us were ready to face. I barely slept that night, my mind unraveling every word the CPS officer had said. Even long after he left, I sat in the same chair, staring at the wall as if the truth had carved itself into the paint. My daughter's pain I never knew she carried, echoed through my thoughts like a haunting melody. The silence around me felt less empty now and more like a long corridor I had to walk through to reach her again. When morning finally arrived, pale and cold, the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. I felt hollow, like a house swept clean but missing something essential. I wrapped myself in a shawl and shuffled into the kitchen, making coffee with mechanical motions. As I stood there waiting for it to brew, my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. My heart skipped. With shaking hands I answered. A soft female voice came through. Is this her mother? Just hearing those words my knees weakened. Yes, I breathed. Who is this? This is Dr. Reyes, she said. I'm your daughter's therapist. The room suddenly felt airless. I clutched the edge of the counter to stay upright. Is she okay? Did something happen? She's safe, the therapist assured quickly. But she had a difficult session yesterday. And she mentioned wanting to contact you, but said she couldn't bring herself to do it. My throat tightened painfully. Why not? She's afraid, the therapist said softly. Not of you hurting her, but of disappointing you. Of not being the strong, perfect daughter she thinks you wanted her to be. Her words sank into me slowly, spreading like fire. Heavy, hot, unbearable. I whispered. I never wanted her to be perfect. Just happy. I believe you, the therapist replied gently. But she doesn't know how to reconcile that with her own memories. She remembers emotional absence, long work nights, fear of burdening you. I closed my eyes, tears welling again. I didn't know she felt that way. I thought I was doing right by her. Most parents do, she said. But the heart remembers moments the mind overlooks. There was a pause, quiet, heavy. The therapist continued. She is making progress. But there's something she still hasn't told you. Something important. And she asked me if I could ease you into it. Fear prickled up my spine. What is it? The therapist took a careful breath. She's been struggling with severe depression. Deep-rooted. Long before last night. My hand flew to my mouth. A sob burst out before I could stop it. She hides it well, the therapist added. But inside, she's been carrying a storm for years. She only mentioned it to someone recently. And that someone wasn't you. The words hit harder than any rejection ever could. She's also dealing with panic disorder. The therapist continued. Her triggers are linked to childhood memories, when she felt alone, overwhelmed, invisible. Invisible. That word burned. I felt it like a knife sliding through soft tissue. She said she didn't want you to see her broken. That's why she pushed you away. She didn't want her darkness to dim your view of her. My tears fell freely now, hot, relentless streams carving paths down my face. I whispered, voice shaking. I could have helped her. If she told me. I know, the therapist said gently. But depression lies. It convinces even the strongest people that they're unworthy of love. A sharp silence followed her words. Then she added softly. She still loves you. Deeply. That's why you're her emergency contact. Even when she can't let you in. You're still the first person she thinks of when she's afraid. That single sentence shattered me completely. Before ending the call, the therapist said, she needs time. But when she's ready, she will reach out. Just be steady ground for her, even from a distance. I thanked her through broken breaths and ended the call, standing in the kitchen as the world around me blurred. My daughter wasn't rejecting me out of selfishness, cruelty, or ingratitude. She was drowning, and she didn't want me to see her underwater. I sank to the floor, arms wrapped around myself. Memories flooded in, her small hand gripping mine at her father's funeral, the way she used to slip drawings under my office door, the nights she waited up for me to come home, pretending she wasn't tired. And now, all these years later, she was still waiting, waiting for courage, waiting for healing, waiting for the version of herself she believed was worthy of love. I wiped my tears and took a trembling breath. She needed space. She needed time. She needed healing. But she also needed something else, something I had failed to give her before. She needed a mother who could face the truth, even when it hurt. A mother who could stand still when her child pushed her away. A mother who understood that love sometimes meant stepping back, and sometimes meant stepping forward. I didn't know it then, but the choice I made next would become the turning point in both our lives. Because the truth wasn't done unfolding. And the next revelation waiting for me would tear open the final layer of mystery, and force me to confront a part of her story I never knew existed. The day after speaking to her therapist, I moved through my apartment like a ghost, quiet, deliberate, weighted by truths that settled heavy on my shoulders. Everything I once believed about my daughter, about our distance, about her coldness toward me, had been rewritten in a single night. She wasn't pushing me away because she hated me. She wasn't choosing others over me. She wasn't ungrateful or cruel or heartless. She was hurting. And the pain she carried was far older. Rooted in fears she never voiced, shadows she never let me see. I spent hours sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. My coffee went cold. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the heater, the wind tapping against the window, cars passing outside. Life continued moving around me, but I felt suspended in a moment too heavy to step out of. I kept replaying her therapist's words. She still loves you, even when she can't let you in. It was a strange kind of comfort, like receiving a blanket in a storm that had already soaked you to the bone. By noon my thoughts consumed me. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The cold slapped my cheeks instantly, sharp and sobering. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked without a destination, letting the world guide me. My breath fogged the air, swirling and vanishing just like the doubts in my mind. I found myself wandering toward a part of the city I rarely visited. A quiet street, lined with old brick buildings and small shops. One shop caught my eye. A tiny bookstore with string lights draped around the window. Something tugged inside me, a gentle pull, and I walked in. The warmth inside hit me immediately. Shelves overflowed with books, and an elderly man behind the counter gave me a soft smile. I drifted through the aisles, running my fingers along book spines, feeling the stories beneath them. Then, without thinking, I picked up a book about understanding depression, raw stories written by people who lived through it. I found myself flipping through the pages, reading confessions of exhaustion, loneliness, fear, shame, and suddenly I wasn't just reading. I was understanding, really understanding. That depression didn't erase love. It simply buried it under the weight of invisible storms. It wasn't that my daughter didn't want me. She just couldn't reach me without drowning herself. I bought the book and walked back out into the cold, holding it to my chest like a lifeline. As I turned the corner, my phone buzzed. My heart flipped painfully. Her name was on the screen. My daughter. For a moment I froze. Fear and hope collided inside me. My hands trembled as I answered. Hello. My voice cracked. There was silence on the other end, long, fragile, trembling silence. Then a tiny breath. A tiny whimper. And finally her voice, soft, breaking, barely holding itself together. Mom. I'm sorry. Those 3 words shattered me. My legs nearly gave out. I had to lean against a building to steady myself. Sweetheart, you don't have to be sorry, I whispered, tears already sliding down my cheeks. She sniffed, her voice trembling. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. Everything felt heavy, and when you showed up last night, I panicked. I said things I didn't mean. I hid. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Her breath hitched like she was fighting tears. Mom, I'm so tired. Hearing her say that, I'm so tired, broke something inside me that I didn't know was still intact. Those weren't the words of a daughter rejecting her mother. Those were the words of someone at the edge. Someone fighting a battle she didn't have the strength to explain. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my voice. I'm here, I whispered. Always. Even from far away. Even if you need space. I'm not going anywhere. She let out a small, painful sound, half laugh, half sob. I miss you, she whispered back. The wind carried her words into the cold air, turning them into something fragile and precious. I pressed my palm against my chest, as if holding my heart together. I miss you too. We didn't say much more. Just a few soft exchanges, fragile threads trying to weave themselves into something unbroken. Before hanging up, she whispered, Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. I swallowed my tears. Never, I said. Never, sweetheart. When the call ended, I stood there in the falling snow, letting the world blur around me. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a full embrace. But it was a beginning. A hesitation softening. A door cracked open instead of shut. The first drop of rain before a long-awaited thaw. I walked back home slowly, holding my book, holding her voice in my heart, each step lighter than the one before. Little did I know, the final truth, the one I hadn't heard yet, the one that would explain everything down to the bone, was waiting just around the corner. A truth she hadn't told me on the phone. A truth that would change the direction of our healing. Forever. That night after the call, I stayed awake for hours, replaying every word my daughter had whispered. There was relief in hearing her voice, in knowing she hadn't shut the door completely. But beneath that relief was a tremor, an unspoken weight in her tone that told me her apology wasn't the whole story. Something else lingered in her silence, something she couldn't bring herself to say yet. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. Each passing minute felt heavier, pressing against my ribs, urging me to prepare myself. The truth was coming. I could feel it approaching like a slow, inevitable storm. And sometime around dawn, exhausted from emotion but unable to sleep, I whispered into the darkness, "Whatever it is, we'll survive it." But I didn't know how much strength the coming truth would demand from me. The next morning, snow was falling softly outside, layering the world in silence. I made a cup of tea and sat near the window, watching flakes drift like tiny pieces of forgotten pain. My phone buzzed again, this time a text. My heart jumped when I saw her name. "Mom, can we talk?" Not on the phone. She sent an address. A therapist's office. My breath caught. She wanted me to meet her there. My hands trembled as I typed back, "I'll be there." I dressed with a nervousness that felt almost childlike, choosing a soft sweater she always complimented, brushing my hair twice, checking my reflection as if trying to make sure I didn't look as fragile as I felt. The drive there was a blur of fogged windows, slippery roads, and a heart beating too fast. When I arrived, I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly, whispering to myself, "Be steady. Be calm. She needs your strength." The therapist's office was small, warm, and quiet. Soft light filled the room, and the faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. My daughter sat on the couch, knees pulled close, hands twisting together. Her face looked tired, more tired than any young woman should look. The moment our eyes met, 1,000 emotions passed between us. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She simply whispered, "Hi, Mom." I sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between us, but close enough that she could feel my presence. The therapist nodded encouragingly. "She has something she wants to tell you," she said gently. My daughter swallowed hard, her fingers trembling. Tears glimmered in her eyes before she even began speaking. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "there's a reason I pushed you away. A reason I couldn't let you see me." Her breath shook as she inhaled. I wasn't just dealing with depression, or anxiety, or memories. Her voice dropped even lower. I was dealing with something that happened recently. Something I didn't want you to see because I didn't want you to blame yourself. My heart stilled. My entire body froze. Slowly, painfully, she continued. "Someone hurt me." Those 3 words detonated inside my chest like a silent explosion. For a moment the room blurred. My ears rang. My heart thudded in slow, heavy beats. I felt every muscle in my body tense with a force I didn't know I still carried. She wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "It wasn't your fault. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think you failed me. I didn't want you to feel that pain. I didn't want to be another burden." I covered my mouth, a choke sound escaping me. I reached for her slowly, gently, letting her decide. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into me, slowly at first, then fully, collapsing into my arms with a sob that tore through the quiet room. I held her tight, holding her like she was a piece of my soul I'd finally found again. Tears soaked her hair, my sweater, my hands. A grief I had never known surged through me. A mother's grief, heavy and raw. "Sweetheart," I whispered through tears, "you could never be a burden. Never. And none of this is your fault." She clung to me with a desperation that broke my heart further. "I didn't want you to think you didn't protect me," she whispered. I cupped her face, forcing her to look at me through tears. "You are not responsible for the cruelty of others. And you are not responsible for my feelings. Protecting you was always my job. And even if I wasn't there at that moment, I'm here now. I'm here for every moment after." The therapist watched quietly, letting us fall apart and rebuild in our own fragile way. Minutes passed like hours, or maybe seconds, I couldn't tell. All I felt was her small frame trembling in my arms, all the storm she'd hidden finally spilling out. When she finally sat up again, wiping her swollen eyes, her voice softened. Mom, can we try again? Not everything at once. Just try. I touched her cheek gently. We'll take it one day at a time, I whispered. Together. No rushing. No pressure. Just love. A small, exhausted smile appeared on her lips, the kind of smile a wounded person wears when they finally believe they're safe. And in that moment I knew the truth. This journey wouldn't be easy. Healing never is. But she wasn't alone anymore. And neither was I. When we left the therapist's office, snow was still falling. A quiet, gentle snowfall that looked almost like a blessing. She slipped her hand into mine, hesitant at first but then steady. For the first time in years we walked side by side, not as a perfect mother and daughter, but as two imperfect souls learning how to love each other again. The road ahead would be long, uneven, sometimes painful, but it would be ours. And sometimes that's all a family needs. A beginning, not a perfect ending.